The evening sun hung low over the hills of Banta, its dying light dripping gold upon the thatched roofs like molten honey. The air smelled of roasted yam and burning wood, a scent that whispered home to those who had wandered too far. Yet, for Yamba, son of the late hunter Okala, home was no longer a place of peace. It was a shadow, a wound, a riddle, wrapped in silence. He walked the narrow path that led from the marketplace, his steps measured, his eyes clouded with sorrow. The elders, sitting under the great cotton tree, nodded at him, but said nothing. They knew the weight a man carried could not always be seen, and Yamba's burden was heavy, heavier than the calabash slung over his shoulder, the one his father had left him just before he died. They said it was no ordinary calabash. They said it whispered his father's last gift and his first curse. And in Banta, when the wind carries a voice from an empty gourd, it is not the wind that speaks. It all began the night Okala died. The moon hid behind thick clouds, as if ashamed of what it was about to witness. The old hunter had returned from the forest bleeding, clutching his side, his breath shallow. Okala had hunted lions and wrestled leopards, but this wound, this was no beast's doing. Before dawn, he called his only son to his side. "Yamba," he whispered, his voice weak. "When a man's shadow begins to speak, his days are few. There is a calabash in the shrine hut. Take it, guard it, but never, ever open it. When it speaks, listen, but do not answer." Then his eyes grew still, and that was the end of Okala the Fearless, but the beginning of Yamba's distress. They buried the great hunter with the rites of warriors. Drums beat like thunder, women wailed, and the earth swallowed him whole. Afterward, life continued, but not for Yamba. That very night, as the wind danced through the trees, the calabash whispered. It called his name, softly at first, then again, Yamba. Sometimes it laughed, a chilling, soft laugh that crawled right under his skin. And in those whispers, his torment began. Weeks turned into moons. The harvest came and went. But the whispers only grew louder. When the dry harmattan wind blew, it carried voices that only he could hear. Desperate, he sought help from Mama I, the village seer, a woman older than time itself, and as wise as the tortoise from the folk tales. Her hut smelled of herbs, smoke, and secrets. "Son of Okala," she said, her ancient fingers running over cowrie shells, "the calabash you carry is the mouth of your father's spirit. It guards a truth buried in fire." Yamba frowned. With desperation, he asked, "What truth?" The seer leaned closer, her voice like dry leaves brushing against each other. Her eyes were dark and deep. "The hand that took your father's life," she rasped, "wears the beads of your own blood." Yamba froze. His mind reeled. "You mean?" But the seer raised a finger, cutting him off. "Do not speak names when shadows are listening. Go, but beware. When a man digs a pit for another, he often buries himself beside it." Yamba left her hut trembling, and as he walked away, it seemed the wind itself laughed like a ghost behind him. That night, the calabash whispered again. Only this time, it was not laughter. It was weeping. "My son," the voice said, hoarse and filled with sorrow. "I was betrayed by a brother." Yamba's blood ran cold. He had only one, Uncle Dulla, his father's younger brother, the very man who had taken him in after the burial. Could it be? No, it couldn't. Dulla was respected, kind, generous. The village called him the man of truth. But the calabash would not lie. Each night, the whispers grew more insistent, and the guiltless son grew more weary. For 3 nights, the voice told its terrible tale, a story of envy, of a burning desire for power, of a brother who craved the hunter's charm of invincibility. It spoke of poison poured into a drinking gourd, of betrayal beneath the cold light of the full moon. On the fourth night, Yamba could no longer bear the whispers. He took the calabash to the riverbank, determined to destroy it, to end the madness once and for all. But, as he raised his hand to smash it, the water of the river swirled violently. A shadow rose from its depths, taking the shape of his father, Okala. His eyes, like burning coals. "My son," the apparition said, its voice echoing across the water. "Truth cannot die where lies still breathe." The river stilled, the shadow dissolved, and the calabash in Yamba's hands glowed faintly before returning to normal. Days later, a festival was announced. The Feast of Hunters. It was a celebration of bravery and bloodlines. A night of dance, pride, and stories told by firelight. Dollar, dressed in fine wrappers, was to preside over the ceremony. He stood tall and proud before the crowd. Yamba watched as the elders gathered. Drums rolled like thunder over the hills, and palm wine flowed like a river. When Dollar finally stood to speak, his voice boomed with authority. "Tonight, we honor those who keep our land safe. We honor the brave. The spirit of my brother, Okala, watches over us." At that very moment, the calabash at Yamba's side began to hum. He felt it tremble, alive, with an unseen energy. The air grew tight, and his chest pounded like the festival drums. He knew what he had to do. The truth must be spoken, even if it burned the tongue that spoke it. He stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear. "Uncle Dollar," he said, "the spirit of Okala does more than watch." The crowd murmured, confused. Dollar frowned, his face darkening. "What are you saying, boy?" Yamba lifted the calabash high for all to see. "Let the truth speak for itself." A sudden, powerful wind swept through the square, snuffing out the torches. The air grew thick and heavy, and from the calabash came a voice, deep, booming, and filled with sorrow. It was the voice of Okala. "Dula, brother of my own blood. Why did you poison me?" The crowd gasped. Women screamed and fell to their knees. Men staggered back in horror. Dula collapsed, trembling. "No, no, it cannot be. I only wanted your charm," he shrieked. Just then, the calabash cracked open, and from within rose a faint, pure light that formed the image of Okala, his spirit finally whole again. "You sought power," the spirit declared, "and you found death. The earth always remembers." Dollar clutched his chest, crying out, "Forgive me, forgive me." But the only answer was the silence of the wind. When the light faded, Dollar lay still on the ground, his eyes wide, his lips parted, as if trying to finish a prayer that would never be answered. The calabash shattered into 1,000 pieces, its glowing shards turning to dust, and with them, the whispers finally ceased. Weeks passed, the village spoke of nothing else. Some said the gods had avenged the great hunter. Others said his son had brought justice from the spirit world, speaking with thunder. But Yamba spoke little. He rebuilt his father's shrine, offered yams and palm oil, and prayed not for vengeance, but for peace. One evening, as the sun sank behind the Iroko trees, he heard a voice again, not from a calabash, but carried on the wind itself. "My son," it said gently, "the river of destiny runs deep, but the one who rows with truth will never drown." Yamba smiled, tears of relief tracing paths down his face. He knelt beside the shrine and whispered, "Rest, Father. The drums of truth have spoken." The wind carried his words through the forest, across the river, and into the hills, where even the ancestors paused to listen. Because, in Banta, they say, a man's shadow may follow him by day, but it is his truth that follows him beyond the grave. Many years later, the children of Banta would sit under the moon and tell his story, the story of Yamba, the fearless. The boy who listened when the dead whispered, and every Harmattan night, when the wind rustled through the trees, the elders would nod and say, "The Whispering Calabash still speaks, not in fear, but in truth." If this tale moved your spirit, let your fingers tell the story. Like, share, and subscribe for more tales of destiny, mystery, and wisdom. Remember, a story untold is a drum unplayed. Let the drum of storytelling never fall silent. In Africa, they say, the drum never sleeps. For every adage is a story waiting to wake. Thanks for listening.